Rajendra Ramoon Maharaj, and we have a very special guest with us today. Jason, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, thanks so much. My name is Jason Ray. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I serve as the president and CEO for the Wisconsin LGBT Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, such an important organization. And how did you get involved with this organization?
It's a great question. I actually founded the organization about 9 years ago. We launched in September of
Wow.
2012. Yeah, it's a crazy little story. So, I went to Marquette University, and after graduation, I fell in love with Milwaukee. And after graduation, I decided I wanted to stay in the area. And during that time, after graduation, I started hearing from some of my LGBTQ classmates that they were moving away. They said they had to go to Chicago, to LA, to New York, that you couldn't be an out professional here in Wisconsin. And I didn't think that was the case. So we organized at the time what we called the Young LGBT Professionals of Milwaukee group. We put a Facebook event together. We organized a happy hour and said, let's just see if anybody shows up. We had 40 folks come to that first event. We did it the next month, the next month, the next month. And we ended up doing a focus group with attendees and really realized that there was a real gap in Wisconsin around LGBT economic inclusion and LGBT workforce development work. And so we put together, we created a logo, made a website, put a board together, and launched in September of 2012. We weren't sure what would happen. And here we are almost 9 years later, almost 700 businesses from around Wisconsin as a member and growing each and every day.
Wow, I say bravo to you. Bravo, bravo. That's amazing. As we celebrate Pride this year, there are so many things that are being focused upon the LGBTQ community in terms of race, identity, health, culture. What are some of the things that have been on your heart as we celebrate Pride that we want to let people stay focused on?
It's a really great question, and one that, I think the first thing that comes to my mind, and it's a conversation I've had with many this month, is that we shouldn't limit Pride to just June, that we have to think about it as, what are we doing July through May to really be inclusive of the LGBTQ community? That it's great to be supportive this month, but how are you being an advocate the other 11 months of the year? What else are you doing to fight for full economic inclusion, for full legal protections? That is one thing that is weighing on me. I think the other thing that's really actually weighing on me as I think about the LGBTQ community right now is there was an assumption, and I hear this from many, that they just assume, once we got marriage equality a number of years ago, that everything was done and over. And we still look at the struggle within our own community. And, right now we are seeing the trans community in particular being attacked across this country. In state legislators, there's a bill in Wisconsin right now attacking trans youth. So we see that. And then I think the other piece is that that often gets overlooked is just that intersectional identity within the community. The LGBTQ community is not just one monolithic community that looks the same and acts the same, that, we are in intersecting identities and really realizing some of the more marginalized communities and some of the traumas that they've experienced. And how do we, as we celebrate Pride this month, recognize and make sure that we uplift those voices and provide those spaces to really help the entire LGBTQ community feel appreciated, feel welcomed, and be able to live their full, true, authentic self.
Yeah, I think it's more than ever, this Pride has a special focus. And I'm so glad you spoke about the issue of what's happening with trans youth around sports here in our state. What advice do you give to the young trans girls and boys who are fighting that fight, who are literally on the front lines trying to fight for their identity and their full humanity? What advice, what words of wisdom do you give them as we celebrate Pride this month?
I wish that I could give them advice, and I don't think I should be the one giving advice, but I will say thank you. I will say thank you to them for using their voice and being so brave and so bold and so authentically themselves. I was at the state capitol last week when the governor raised the pride flag, and there were two trans youth that spoke, or gender non-binary youth that spoke and shared their experience, and it was so powerful. So I don't give advice. I give major kudos for being able to use their voice and encourage them to continue to use it. I think that is the most powerful thing that we can do to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, is to use personal stories, to use your voice when you can. And I just give them so much credit because I don't think that, well, I know that I was not that comfortable in my identity back when I was their age. And the fact that they're able to do so, I just, I admire them dearly for it.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And, children in any movement have always been the foot soldiers that have brought real change. Um, I have a question in regards to, any community has their own positives and negatives. And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the issues that we're facing in our own state around the LGBTQ community with racism on the heels of the second great civil rights movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. What do you see as things that we can find in terms of common ground around racism within the LGBTQ community, which people don't, often think exists, but like any community, there's positives and negatives, and racism is something that's really on the forefront, bigotry. And I would love to hear your thoughts as a leader in the community around that.
It's a really great question, one that we've spent a lot of time as an organization discussing over the past year about how do we even do better in this and how do we raise it up. And we just had some conversations last month and are about to launch. We haven't really shared this publicly yet, so we're going to share it now. We're getting ready to launch our Queer BIPOC initiative to really say, how are we as an organization really lifting up our queer BIPOC community members and making them feel included, whether it's, through special events and opportunities for them so that they can have that safe space to be included and know that they belong, and to build those connections. Because we also know there's so much, there's still discrimination, within certain communities against, LGBTQ people of color and things. So providing that same space for them to come together. But then we're also looking at how do we as an organization really work to make sure that we are doing trainings for our members to be a better BIPOC ally. I think that's one of the things that we really all need to do, is that we can't just say, oh, we're inclusive and we're doing it, that we need to do that continual self-education there. I love one of the books I read is from Jennifer Brown, and talks about the inclusive leader continuum, and it's all about that continual self-education and awareness. And we know that we as a chamber and as an LGBTQ community need to do better to be better allies to the BIPOC community, and not even allies, advocates for. And that starts with doing trainings and us learning where we are failing and addressing those and moving forward collectively together.
Yeah, I mean, one of my heroes is the prolific James Baldwin, and he said that it's about bearing witness as a community. When we see each other reflected in our true humanity, it's not just about rainbows and marches, it's about really seeing yourself reflected. And I'm just so glad to hear that you're doing that work. It's so important, and particularly in a state that is really known for being somewhat more conservative, to be able to have that opportunity. For those that don't know, what would you say is the mission of your organization, and how has that mission changed from when you founded it to present day Pride?
It's a great question. So our mission is really to create a welcoming and inclusive business community. And we think of it as, how are we helping LGBTQ and allied businesses and organizations grow and be more successful? We think that that's one way to create change. So, I would say we do a number of initiatives and projects, from working with corporate employee resource groups to having a job board and doing workforce development. I think the biggest thing that we have seen really change since we launched was some of the corporate work that has happened, and seeing the corporate inclusion for the LGBTQ community. 9 years ago, you weren't seeing companies put up rainbow flags. You weren't seeing them change their logos. And while that is certainly not everything in fighting for equality, that's a great step forward, though, to show visibility and awareness. And I think that is one piece. But I also think we're seeing even more opportunities for people to come out. It's interesting. I was talking to a business owner yesterday who, they've been a chamber member for a while, but they haven't been out as it. We have allies as members, and we don't ask at the door, are you LGBTQ? Are you ally? But they're like, I've been fearful of, whether or not it's okay for me to come out. Will I lose customers? Will I lose business by being an out business owner? And that is one thing that, hasn't really changed since we launched. There still is that fear, that stigma of what will happen, if I'm out, will that impact my business? So we're really committed to doing everything that we can to say, how do we create that inclusive business community? We know that people want to do business with those that share their values. How can we create that safe, open space so that all business owners can be their authentic, true self? How can we help find consumers who want to support those businesses and organizations, and really create this ecosystem around inclusion in the business community?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And, I think that it's so important for people to feel safe. And as we look at that in this Pride Month, what are some of the issues that are top of your agenda, your top three agenda issues that the community should know about and be really focused on in terms of this next cycle of elections, this next cycle of our year? What are the top three things that are on your heart?
I think number one is, and we already touched on it, is fighting back against some of these anti-trans bills, of just making sure that we as a community are standing strong and we are standing united together in that. After that, I really think, I don't know that I have, top two things that come to my mind right off the top of my head. I think it really is about supporting one another and really building that intentional inclusion within the LGBTQ community, where we are not leaving folks behind, that we are really being intentional about making sure that all diverse voices are at the table. I know that's something I hear from different nonprofits and leaders all the time, that we need to make sure that we are lifting up diverse voices within our community to share stories, to take on positions of leadership, to be engaged in that work. And I think for me, that, I guess, when I think of a priority, it really comes back to that queer BIPOC initiative that we're getting ready to launch as a chamber of really, how are we being intentional about making sure that our membership, our organization, and the entire LGBTQ community really reflects the community, and isn't just a few folks at the table, but that all voices are included at that discussion, and all thoughts are heard.
Because representation matters, and I think there's this misnomer, like with all great movements and all great communities, that every LGBTQ plus community member is the same and has the same views, and it really is like the African American community, Hispanic, Latinx, Indigenous, everyone is very different. So I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that. As we celebrate Pride this month, today, as someone watches this, a young person's going to come out, and they're going to face many challenges in that. What advice, if you have any, and I know you don't like to give too much advice, but as a person who has come out, who's been successful, who has gone on the other side of it, and I'm sure has had your challenges and your positives and negatives, what advice do you give to a young person who's coming out today as they watch this and enter, in Milwaukee specifically, the gay community?
It's a really great question, and one that I think about actually often. One of the programs that we run at the Chamber is an Emerging Leaders program that works to connect LGBTQ college students with small business owners, corporate professionals, nonprofit leaders, to talk about just that, and to share those experiences. And I think first and foremost, I would say, welcome. You are appreciated. You are welcomed into a family, an inclusive, chosen family here. And I would then follow up and say, reach out and find a mentor within the community. Find someone that you want to work with. That's really important. But I think the other kind of just, tactical thing I would say is, know that there are resources out there that can help you continue to be your true authentic self, whether that's, at the Chamber, we've got a job board on our website, for example, so people can find inclusive employment opportunities, so that they, as they're looking for jobs and opportunities, they can go and work for a company where they can bring their true self to work each and every day and don't have to hide a part of who they are. So that there are resources like that exist out there that can allow them to really flourish. But I would say, continue to live your true self. I think that is the most important thing that can be done. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do everything that we can to build that welcoming and inclusive community for particularly young people who are coming out, but for anyone who's coming out, for that matter. In fact, there was a study from the Human Rights Campaign about 2 years ago that showed that 46% of LGBTQ workers weren't out at work. 46%, which is a sobering statistic. But I think it shows that we all collectively have so much more that we need to do to really create that safe, inclusive experience and workplace where people don't have to hide who they are. And that's part of what Pride is about, is being able to celebrate our authentic self, but recommitting even more to what do we do next, that it doesn't end this month, that it is about us continuing to be advocates as we move forward.
Yeah, and as we celebrate Pride, my final question for you is, what do you know for sure?
What do I know for sure? I know for sure that it is okay and it is good to live your true authentic self.
Mm,
That you're going to face, we all have faced discrimination, to face family members who may not appreciate it, but um, there is something cathartic, there is something about being your true self that lifts those weights, and it is not always easy. But I know from my own experience, when I was coming out, it wasn't easy, but it made me feel whole and true to myself, and that made the world of difference. So I hope that others feel that same opportunity to get to live their true authentic self.
yes, and for those who want to join your organization or make donations or find out more, how can one do that?
Yeah, you're welcome to visit our website. We're wislgbtchamber.com.
Wow. Well, thank you, my friend, for doing, as my favorite president, Barack Obama, says, the work of angels. I am so excited to meet you, and I think it's really important, and particularly for those BIPOC leaders of color who are queer, to really check out this organization. I think you'll be surprised the resources, the networking, and the community that you would be part of. So, Jason, happy Pride. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. And remember, as we leave, that, as Dr. Maya Angelou says, we are more alike than different. Happy Pride, Milwaukee.